Hello, today is Wednesday, February 25th, and welcome to episode 562 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vina. I'm joined today by Advisory Board Member Lester Munson, Senior Fellow Matt Hayden, and fellow Algene Sajeri. Last night, President Trump delivered a full-throated defense of his first year back in office in his State of the Union address. The State of the Union, of course, is mandated by Article 2 of the Constitution, which requires the president to report on the nation's condition and recommend legislative action. Clocking in at an hour and 48 minutes, this was the longest State of the Union in history. President Trump beat his previous record of 99 minutes. During the course of his speech, the president claimed responsibility for a turnaround for the ages while calling on Congress to enact several of his administration's initiatives. Immigration, tariffs, and affordability were among the hot topics. Later on in the speech, he also banked a number of national security wins. He touted his success at stopping a record amount of drugs from entering the United States. On Iran, he claimed that U.S. strikes in June had, quote, obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program, unquote, and reiterated the U.S. position that the United States will never allow Iran to obtain nuclear weapons. He also acknowledged his administration's efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Yesterday, of course, was the 4-year anniversary since Russia launched its full-scale invasion. So, Matt, we're going to start with you first. There's a lot to unpack here. The State of the Union is an annual opportunity for, a lot of pomp, pageantry, and frankly, downright pettiness. And that was on full display last night. What really stood out to you as the most notable events of the evening?
So it's another way to say strategic pettiness equal politics. But at the same time, I tried to put the lens on of if I were one of our adversaries or one of our allies, how would I hear the remarks from the president last night? The good news for a majority of the listening population is that there wasn't anything that was reported out in the last year that hadn't been kind of broadcast pretty heavily. So there was a pretty standard conversation around the successes that the administration feels, the challenges they see with the particular acts they want to put forward, especially in the voting rights context and immigration context. So you had kind of a baseline that was expected coming in. What you didn't see was a lot of future-based outcomes that would have shock and awe or surprise to them. And so if I'm sitting as a nation state within the EU, or if I'm sitting as a partner across the Indo-Pacific, I heard kind of what I had communicated to me previously. So there wasn't a giant arc or change in policy. At the same time, it doesn't mean that roller coaster is going to slow down anytime soon, because the president's goals and where they're lining up seem to be along the lines of we'll get to that as we need to. So we're kind of feeling that out. There wasn't anything that jumped off the page when it came to national security other than the briefings that Congress has been having and how that's escalating. But I know Les is going to cover more on that. So I think we're going to hear more about tariffs. We're going to hear more about how the American people can see the success of the economy and what that resonates with our international partners to help in that economic security equals national security quotient.
Mm-hmm. So, Algene, last year was a very national security heavy year for the president. Perhaps more so than many in the MAGA sphere are comfortable with. Reflecting on these events and listening to his speech, where do you think we're going this year? And building off of Matt's comments that there wasn't necessarily a lot new stuff that was presented in the speech. Rather, it was very sort of, backward looking. What do you think we should take away from that? And what do you think we should be expecting in the year ahead?
Yeah, I find it interesting that arguably the State of the Union, the modern State of the Union, is not just to address Congress, it's to address the American people. And the first thing it should be doing is sort of taking stock of where they are, the American people, really, identifying with the concerns they have with the direction of the country. And I find it really interesting that Trump ignored the difficulties that the average American is facing with the economy. And I think that's really important because voters have been saying for a long time that, the prices and cost of living are are their top concern, not immigration, not, Iran, but, the cost of living. And I found it really fascinating that he mocked the word affordability. Basically, to me, that just tells the average American that they basically shouldn't believe what they are feeling, as far as the pain they're feeling at the pump, in the grocery store, etc. And so I think I want to point out that he also said that, drug prices have dropped by 100%, which means that they don't cost anything, right? That would mean that. And it sort of just ignores everything that the average person is enduring in these United States. And so to me, it just kind of reminded me of my favorite Judge Judy quote, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. Because I feel like that was what he was doing to the American people and sort of saying, everything is great. And then also not offering, like Matt said, any forward-leaning solutions to the problems that the average American is facing. So it really was, to me, very bold in that it was audacious in his ignoring the everyday Americans' views. Also, I felt like it was quite combative, at times racist, and quite frankly, a little bit childish. You know, it's like a nearly 2 hour, like sort of stream of consciousness rant. And it was like a long run-on sentence that really didn't say much of anything about the future of America and where he wants to take it and address the American people's problems. So I felt like in that way it was quite historic. And I also thought it was telling that, when he was talking about tariffs in particular, the Speaker of the House actually leapt to his feet in applause when Trump stated that he does not need Congress to raise tariffs. Never mind what the Supreme Court and the US Constitution say. I think that was really breathtaking, actually. It was a demonstration of just how Trump's Congress, how weak they are, how willing they are to just sort of usurp their own authorities and just hand them over to the president. So in that way, I think it is telling of where our country is headed, because it's really problematic in how I don't think that we're going to see Congress push back, and we're going to see more centralized, sort of authoritarian sort of approach to lawmaking and policymaking in this country.
All right, so Algene in with the Judge Judy reference, absolute icon. You also had a bit of a Freudian slip there, Algene. You called it Trump's Congress. Of course, Congress is its own separate and equal branch of government. So that's quite telling there.
That was very on purpose. Yes, on purpose.
All right, so Les, in case anyone forgot, this is an election year. There's a lot of stake for Republicans. The margins are way too close for comfort. And for those counting, there are 218 Republicans, 214 Democrats, and 3 vacancies. There are also about 18 seats that are right now considered as toss-ups, meaning that they could either go Republican or Democrat. And the majority of these toss-up states are in red states. Les, did President Trump help or hurt Republicans going into November?
Well, I don't think he hurt at all. I don't think this was a big deal of a speech at the end of the day. I think it'll be remembered for how long it was more than anything else. It was definitely the usual Trump kind of performance of a little bit of humor, a little bit of attack, a little bit of provocation, some exaggeration, a lot of bragging, a lot of contextualizing, some very good points, some not so good points. On the national security front, I think the most interesting part of the speech was when he was talking about Iran, and a bunch of Democrats actually stood up and applauded. And so by the way, the more interesting thing that happened yesterday, arguably, was Marco Rubio briefing the Gang of Eight on what the administration is planning for Iran. The talks over there nuclear weapons program and things like that are tomorrow in Geneva. It's possible the U.S. is going to strike at Iran if those talks don't go well. A bunch of members, Democrats in particular, came out of that briefing yesterday very sober-minded, saying this is a big deal. The president needs to make clear to the American people what's at stake and why we're going to do the things we're going to do. So it seems to me like we're going to be talking about Iran quite a bit in the next few days, just kind of based on those leading indicators. And so that bipartisanship, I think, is that at least some bipartisanship that was demonstrated in the House last night while the president was talking, I think is going to be significant. And I think at the end of the day, that might be what this is remembered for, is the way he talked about Iran and the Democrats' reaction. And we'll see what happens in the next few days, as we say during the Trump administration. We'll see what happens. But that, for me, that was the most interesting thing that happened last night.
All right, so I think we may have our topic for Friday then. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
All right, y'all, that's a wrap. Thanks as always to Kelly Crowley, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, February 27th, where we may or may not be talking about Iran for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.